Hi, and welcome back to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today is August 8th, and it doesn't sound like anything special in English, but it sure does in Chinese.
That's right. It is Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all the dads, the grandfathers, maybe even the childless male figures that have helped take care of young people or just mentored others around Taiwan.
That's right. Often it is maybe an elder brother, an uncle, a neighbor, somebody from church. It could be anybody who kind of helped you through some difficult situations in life and showed you some kindness and love. So our title is A Day for Dads. Almost everyone in Taiwan knows that Father's Day is celebrated in August. However, it might surprise many to learn that this is not the case for most of the world. In fact, a majority of countries celebrate fathers and fatherly figures in June. What's more, the very first Father's Day was celebrated in neither June nor August.
The first Father's Day in the U.S. was essentially a memorial for a small town in West Virginia. An explosion at a local mine killed more than 360 men, and more than 200 of the victims were fathers. To honor these men, Grace Golden Clayton held a Father's Day celebration on July 5th, 1908.
Only a year later, though, someone proposed a yearly day in recognition of fathers. The woman behind this campaign was Sonora Smart Dodd, who was raised by her father alongside her siblings after her mother died. She was inspired by a sermon on Mother's Day and thought that fathers needed a day of honor as well. She reached out to local churches, shops, and government offices in her town of Spokane, Washington, and obtained support to celebrate an official Father's Day on June 19, 1910. This celebration caught on, and soon people around the country were observing a day for dads in June. Eventually, in 1972, President Nixon declared Father's Day a national holiday, and the third Sunday in June was designated as a day to honor fathers.
Today, many places around the world celebrate dads in June. Although the day is not a public holiday, it is a chance for families to take time to appreciate their fathers. The celebration isn't limited to dads, though. Many use the day as an opportunity to celebrate any father figure in their life, including grandfathers, uncles, or anyone else that plays a key role in one's family.
Now, I have to make some comments on this, and my kids are well aware of my feelings on this topic. Like for Mother's Day, kindergartens and schools often have the kids make a little paper project saying how much I love my mother, and they will always quote the same Chinese poem about the mother who sews clothing for her son. And I have never cared much for Mother's Day. I think you guys just be good kids all the time. I do not need a special day. Just always be good kids. That's the way to honor your parents. I feel the same way about Father's Day. I adored my father. I would not like him any better on one particular day because I was so fond of him.
You know, I maybe agree and disagree with this. I see where you're coming from. And as a childless adult, I don't have children. My mom and sisters feel sheepish when Father's Day rolls around. My dad passed away a long time ago. So they'll always wish my brother happy Father's Day. And then they'll say like, also Chris too, happy Father's Day. But
it's awkward.
They feel a little awkward. I'm like, it's okay. I'm not a dad. And like I have cats, but it's not quite the same. That's right. It's my choice. And I'm a teacher. I'm a mentor figure, but I'm not a father. And I'm okay with that. But I do feel it's fine to like your birthday. It's like it's okay if we want to have a reason to do something special. It's a nice reason to go enjoy a nice breakfast with your family, I suppose. But yeah, generally speaking, if no one wished me happy Father's Day, I wouldn't think twice about it. So I see where you're coming from in that regard. I don't need something special for this. I'm fine. But it is nice to have a reason to go for breakfast with my family. That's okay.
So you can guess how I feel about birthdays as well.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same. So a lot of people, they post their birthday on Facebook. So everybody will say, happy birthday. And there's like 500 people wishing you happy birthday. You can't answer them all. And it's just they're doing it to be nice, but it's not that meaningful. So I would rather people not know my birthday, and I will tell you how you can know it's my birthday. Every year I say happy birthday Beethoven and Jane Austen.
I was going to make a joke to say it was yesterday.
No, it wasn't.
I'm just making a joke.
And I will probably keep on doing it. I've done it for many years. So if you hear me wishing Beethoven and Jane Austen a happy birthday, then you know what's going on. And to tell you the truth, Wesley hasn't figured it out yet. He'll say, oh, today is Beethoven's birthday, and he still doesn't know, even though I've known Wesley for over 20 years. So anyway, these special days to me are not that meaningful. You should always be good to the people you love. Always keep them in mind. I still have my parents in my heart every single day I live, even though they died years ago. So let's go back to the beginning. Our title is A Day for Dads. Our first paragraph, almost everyone in Taiwan knows that Father's Day is celebrated in August. And this was a surprise to me because I believe Mother's Day is celebrated on the same day. But Father's Day was not. So my first year in Taiwan, I was a bit surprised.
Yeah, I do remember hearing that Father's Day was August 8th, and I didn't quite understand it.
Yeah.
And then they explained to me, well, it was 8/8. And my Chinese was good enough at that point. I mean, it's basic Chinese, but I was like, oh, that's clever. I like that. There's a little way to remember that.
It's just not the Father's Day I grew up with. That's all.
Yeah. So if anything, we were celebrating Father's Day in June, and then I would, way back when my dad was still alive, I would text him, hey, happy Chinese Father's Day. So it was nice too.
Okay.
Let's continue to our next sentence.
However, it might surprise many to learn that this is not the case for most of the world. And Chris and I were both surprised in our first year in Taiwan. In fact, a majority of countries celebrate fathers and fatherly figures in June. Actually, I forgot which month it was, so the article reminded me. What's more, the very first Father's Day was celebrated in neither June nor August.
I really like this phrase, fatherly figures. At the top, we said, Father's Day is a day for neighbors, like you said, and maybe uncles or maybe Boy Scout leaders or whoever was your mentor, maybe your PE teacher or your science teacher, whoever it was that had an outside impact and was a male, we can celebrate them as a fatherly figure. And I like that you said neighbors too, because initially when I thought of who are these people we would say are fatherly figures, neighbor didn't come to mind, but I did have a very friendly downstairs adult man neighbor. And he was always really nice to us. And he did goofy things with us. He'd hang us from the top of a door hinge and he would swing us around. And it was just really fun to watch cartoons with him. And it was always really nice to have a guy like that right downstairs.
In my experience, I would find people who could do things that my father wasn't especially good at or interested in. My father was good at the things I cared about most, like language. I mean, anything that I have achieved in language is because of my father. But if you talk about going out swimming and camping, that was not my father's thing. So I would go out with the family of a friend, and they were into cabins up north like we have in Minnesota and all kinds of other stuff. So very often you can have a wonderful relationship with your father. It doesn't take anything away from your feeling for him, but other people in your life can fulfill other roles, and also many good male teachers.
Agreed.
Okay.
Let's continue to our next paragraph here. The first Father's Day in the U.S. was essentially a memorial for a small town in West Virginia.
What this brought to mind was I recently took a trip to Taroko Gorge with my son and his family when they were here. And so we visited the places where they actually carved out caves to open roads through the mountains. And I said, did they use explosives? And our guide said sometimes they used explosives, but they're very hard to control and they're very dangerous. So they often just dug them out with shovels. And I thought, well, between the shoveling in this dangerous place with those steep, rocky sides of slopes and also the explosives, how many people died? And he said 226. He had it ready. And so they do have a memorial for those people who died. That's the first thing I thought of, was the people who made it able for us to access Taroko Gorge.
When we say essentially, we mean pretty much or basically. And West Virginia is, when I saw West Virginia, I already knew what was coming. West Virginia is really famous for mining, especially coal.
And we should mention another thing. It is one of the poorest states in the entire United States. So you think of the U.S. as Hollywood and these beautiful, thin people who are smart and fashionable. There are a lot of states that are very poor, and West Virginia has one of the lowest median incomes in the entire U.S.
That's right. Let's continue to our next sentence. An explosion at a local mine killed more than 360 men, and more than 200 of the victims were fathers.
that just makes me really sad because you think of what people did, what they sacrificed and risked just to raise their family, just to keep their families alive. Many of them, if they didn't die outright, they got very sick from black lung or other diseases. So a lot of people have suffered a lot from mining. If you want to hear a song about a miner and about a huge mining accident, go to YouTube and look up Big John. I don't know if you remember the song. It was sung by Jimmy Dean, as I remember. It's called Big John. It tells a really, really interesting story, and it still makes me cry.
Another thing while we're talking, if you don't know this word mine, we do need to understand it here. A mine is a big hole in the earth we use to get metals, ores, coal. And there's a famous associated phrase. We'll say the canary in the coal mine. And when we talk about a canary in a coal mine, that means we have some kind of signal that something bad is about to happen. Canary is a small yellow bird, and they're very sensitive to gas. Canaries are animals that die kind of easily. And so if this bird died for some reason in the cave, you know you need to get out. That's right. That means you have a lot of gas in here, and there's a really good chance you're going to die if you don't get out soon. So let's look at our next sentence. To honor these men, Grace Golden Clayton, that's a wonderful name, held a Father's Day celebration on July 5th, 1908.
That's a very old-sounding name. I don't think people have names like that anymore.
Yeah, it's a very resplendent name, right?
Golden, yes. Okay, so the first celebration was to honor these people who died in the mine explosion, I guess.
So be careful with the word honor. I have heard people say honor. I agree. I didn't like it. I have heard it. I put it on my own paper above honor, the H. I cross out the H. I always would tell my students to do that. I have heard people say that. I assume those people chew with their mouth open.
There are only a very few words from French in which the H is not pronounced. And some are very common, like hour, in an hour. We would not say a hour.
Do you W-H-A-T? Do you ever say what with the H? I don't either.
My third grade teacher tried to make us say that.
I heard it on NPR recently. I was like, stop that.
Oh, no. Some people, actually, it's part of their dialect. They're not doing it to show off. Okay. I wrote a paper on this.
Okay.
Yeah, so some people do say what. That's still what they teach in Taiwan, but most of us say what and just leave it at that.
All right. We need to get away from that topic because I'm going to start sweating.
Okay, but actually this thing about whether the H is pronounced or not, there's some weird things happening in English. For example, how do you say H-O-M-A-G-E?
I always say homage.
That's right. And now they still leave the H off, but they say homage.
Okay.
It's really funny. Okay. So these words that start with H, if we don't say the H, it's from French. And so we're thinking, well, since it's from French, we shouldn't say homage, we should say homage.
Yeah.
So you're going to note some funny pronunciation changes in American English these days.
Yeah, I have heard that. That is true. Okay.
Only a year later, though, someone proposed a yearly day in recognition of fathers. So after this, it was originally to memorialize these people who died in the mine explosion. But later on, someone thought, well, we should recognize fathers.
When we propose something, we are suggesting a plan for others to think about, to approve or disapprove.
Now, you sounded like you weren't finished, but it's my turn. The woman behind this campaign was Sonora Smart Dodd, who was raised by her father alongside her siblings after her mother died. And that is not easy for anybody to raise kids alone. A lot of women do it alone. A lot of men do it alone. It's not easy for either sex. I think it's harder for men because that is not their traditional role.
So a campaign, generally we use in relation to war. So we're thinking about from start to finish of the war. And campaign here, I guess, can just, it's equally similar from the start to the beginning of this plan.
She was inspired by a sermon on Mother's Day and thought that fathers needed a day of honor as well. And I agree with this. Since you're going to honor women or mothers, you might as well honor fathers as well, to be fair. Right? Like a sermon, it's what you hear in church. And so you can also use it as an idiom in everyday speech. Like Chris says, Karen, hurry up, time's almost up. You got to get ready. Don't give me a sermon.
That's right. Yeah. So when someone says, don't give me a sermon, that means I don't need to hear you blah, blah, blahing at me.
Telling me what to do.
That's a pretty strong phrase, too. So watch out. It is a little spicy. But this obviously here, she was inspired by a sermon, just a talk on religious or moral topic in church. That's all that means here. So this one is not not so dangerous of a word there.
And they call it a homily in Catholic churches. A homily.
Is that the same thing?
It's about the same thing.
I grew up Roman Catholic, and I remember the word homily. I didn't know it was different than sermon. I didn't actually know that.
Did you ever call it a sermon?
No, it was homily.
Yeah.
But we had like a Polish-speaking priest, and he really struggled with English. I basically went because he supported our Boy Scout troop. He was a really nice guy. He really tried hard in our... We had a really old Polish community, and so...
Oh, that explains that probably. Yeah, so homily is more or less the Catholic equivalent, a Roman Catholic equivalent of a Protestant sermon. She reached out to local churches, shops, and government offices in her town of Spokane, Washington, and obtained support to celebrate an official Father's Day on June 19th, 1910. And this gives us a lot of information. Watch out for Spokane because it looks like Spokane, and I bet a lot of people say it that way.
I have definitely heard people say that. But I don't know if they're natives. So it's just one of those words that people might say without necessarily having been there and growing up. And that would obviously influence your pronunciation.
And there are different ways to say place names in the U.S., often depending on whether you are from the area or not. For example, what is that state right south of Washington?
Oregon?
You sound like a native.
How do you say it?
The way we mostly say it in the Midwest is Oregon.
Oregon. Oh, yeah, Oregon. Oregon. You know what? As a matter of fact, there's an old Mac game called Oregon Trail, and they call it that.
Oregon Trail, though.
Yeah, that's right. So the game was called Oregon Trail, and I remember it said that way, and I've never once thought that I say Oregon, but we say Oregon Trail. I've never once made that connection. That's funny.
For me, it was just the opposite. We normally said Oregon. I have relatives in Oregon who would be horrified to hear me say it that way. And because of those relatives, I changed it to Oregon.
That's funny. I've never once made that connection. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay. This celebration caught on, and soon people around the country were observing a day for dads in June.
When we observe something, generally that means like you scientifically pay attention to something and study it. Here we're talking about we are using this day to say thank you for whatever or whatever. So we observe a holiday that won't necessarily, for example, if there's a holiday in the middle of the week in the U.S., they'll make it fall on a Sunday and we'll observe it then, or they'll roll a Saturday holiday to a Monday so we can have a day off. It's not the actual day, but we're going to celebrate it here.
And I learned that they don't do that in France. So if the holiday falls on a Saturday or Sunday, tough luck.
That happened to us. That happened to us at work a couple times last year. It was very, very sad year last year.
Very sad. This celebration caught on, and soon people around the country were observing a day for dads in June. I think that's pretty straightforward. So it caught on means it became popular. People thought it was a good idea, and they adopted the idea very quickly and very easily. Eventually, in 1972, President Nixon declared Father's Day a national holiday, and the third Sunday in June was designated as a day to honor fathers.
So Nixon, if you don't know, was a very controversial president. He was quite conservative. He was famously caught up in what's called Watergate, where he was really involved in some, honestly, criminal activities. Yeah. And for a very smart man, he did a very stupid thing, which is record himself talking about his crimes.
Yeah. And there is a kind of agreed upon rule that you have to save every document or recording from the White House. And so it was all there.
So I personally have complicated feelings towards Nixon. There's a lot of things about him I don't like, but there's a bunch of things that I've read about him that I was like, you know what, I actually support this idea. And I wonder if it's just not like a broken clock is right twice a day kind of thing. Like, yeah, I don't necessarily like this guy, but yeah, I agree with this. He was
a very shifty character, very dishonest, very crude, his language, but I think that's probably true of most men in general and certainly politicians. But I knew that my father had voted for him. So when this all happened, that he had to resign, that was just a huge, huge, shameful national event. I asked my father how he felt. He held his head down. He said, well, I guess that was a good way to deal with the situation.
That's good. I think it takes a lot of growth to say, like, I think that's a mistake people make today is they're not willing to say, I made a mistake. And that's okay. People make mistakes. You don't need to defend every decision you ever made in your whole life. Sometimes we screw up. And hey, listen, you voted for Nixon and it didn't work out. Okay, that's fine. I respect you. I tell my friends that all the time. You don't need to double down on your opinion. It's fine if you say you change your mind. I think that's a very mature thing to do.
But you could see my father was really not happy about his man having to step down.
Oh, who would be? I agree. I think it's a difficult thing, but it shows the character of your father to say, yeah, this is not for the best.
And I think it's something that he thought was acceptable to say to his younger daughter. Okay, so our last paragraph.
Our final paragraph today. Many places around the world celebrate dads in June.
And we already have that information. We need a few more details.
Although the day is not a public holiday, it is a chance for families to take time to appreciate their fathers.
Okay, a public holiday, that means that nobody has to go to work, basically, except for emergency workers, etc. So although it wasn't made a day when everybody gets a day off, we do try to remember to appreciate our fathers.
The celebration isn't limited to dads, though. Many use the day as an opportunity to celebrate any father figure in their life, including grandfathers, uncles, or anyone else that plays a key role in one's family.
And we've already discussed that.
So there was, interestingly, a movement to combine Mother's Day and Father's Day into one holiday, creatively called Parents' Day.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how I feel about that. I kind of like that there are these holidays in different months. Like I said, I personally think it's okay to find a reason to go to a nice breakfast or lunch with your mom on Mother's Day. And the next month you got June. My dad used to like to celebrate Father's Day by barbecuing in the backyard and
a very guy thing to do.
Watching car races. Oh, my father would make
races.
He would drag out
Indianapolis 500s.
Yes, that's exactly right. And he would make me sit through this
interminable,
dreadful car race for hours on end. And this is what my father wanted. Oh gosh. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about my background, there you go.
I think it's funny that they had a Children's Day, because even at the time when I was a little child, I thought we mainly make trouble for our parents and in my case, my sister. And in the end, it just seemed like a formality. It's something you do just because it's there. It was very perfunctory. And perfunctory means something that you do without really thinking much about what you're doing. You don't care about it that much. You're just doing it to get it done. And it's spelled P-E-R-F-U-N-C-T-O-R-Y. P-E-R-F-U-N-C-T-O-R-Y. It was a very perfunctory kind of thing we went through. It was a formality.
Interestingly, when you mention this, you're just doing it to do it. You're just observing it for the sake of observing. A lot of these holidays that did eventually become actual public holidays were celebrated informally in the past. Thanksgiving is a great example of that. Thanksgiving had been around for quite a while before it was officially observed in the United States as an important holiday in November. And the article doesn't talk about this, but these things do reach back into the past sometimes, where we want to find a reason to say thank you or celebrate this one thing, even if it isn't necessarily an actual holiday today.
Taiwan actually used to have too many holidays. I first arrived in Taiwan in 1976, and we started classes in September, and we had one class, and then a holiday, a holiday, a holiday, and a holiday. We had almost no class because of all of the holidays like Constitution Day and Dr. Sun Yat-sen Day and all this other stuff. It was just week after week of holidays, and I thought, when am I ever going to get some classes in? And so finally they canceled some of those holidays, so they are no longer national holidays. There were too many of them in that period, October.
Do you know when that ended? Because I recall a lot of people talking about it, and I might not have just been aware of it. Maybe I hadn't been in Taiwan long enough, because I definitely recall this conversation years ago.
I'm guessing around 20 years ago.
Okay, so roughly around the time I was here, or maybe it was at the tail end of it where it was still fresh in people's memory. We used to have this day off, but we don't now.
Exactly. Well, we have some more things to say about Father's Day. We haven't told you when it is celebrated, in which specific places. We'll do that tomorrow. Tune in then. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.